Hello, thanks for tuning in to today's tutorial on how to make a double brim beanie. This type of beanie only has the double knit layer in the brim area and the rest of it is single layer. This stylist works starting with the inside brim and working our way to the top of the outside. When we finish knitting the brim, we'll join the cast on edge to the needles to create a finished seam. For this tutorial, I'll be making this blue and white striped beanie. I'm using a bulky weight number 5 yarn called K+C Craft Roving from Joann's. So I've already cast on with waste yarn and knit about 10 rows. So my tip number 1 is to mark every stitch with a stitch marker. These locking stitch markers are great for this technique. It will make it so easy to identify which stitches to use when creating that join seam. So I want to point out this stitch right here. This is the last stitch and it's difficult to find if you don't mark it. So we need to make sure that we mark every stitch so that we don't skip one or get them out of order when we go to join. So I'm done marking everything and I'm going to continue to knit per the pattern until I get to the stripe. I'm going to change color here for the stripe just like we normally do. So I want to point out here that if you have any loose ends that you haven't secured yet or put knots in, you're going to want to do that before we start the first row of the join. If you don't do it, you won't be able to get to it once we finish the join row. So I went ahead and secured my color change, and now we're going to start to bring up the cast on edge. So I'm going to find the first stitch, which happens to be to the left of the tail, and we're going to remove the stitch marker. And you'll see that I'm pinching it so I don't lose it. And then we'll put it on that number 1 needle. So we're going to continue to take each stitch, remove the stitch marker, pick it up with our hook, and place it on the next needle. And we're going to want to do this going all the way around. So you can see how adding these stitch markers, identifying the stitch, makes it very easy to find your next stitch in the correct order and being able to quickly place them on these needles. Tip number 2 is to make sure each stitch is pushed to the bottom of the needle, just like that. Then we can go ahead and pick up that stitch and place it on the needle. And then here's tip number 3, is to make sure all that bulk in between the 2 needles is pushed all the way down below that bar. And then you can advance. This is going to make sure that each stitch is stitched properly and the new stitch on top has the right tension. So one thing I want to mention is if you're working with 2 different colors, you want to make sure that your cast on color is always on the top, like so. If you don't have them stacked in the proper order, you will notice this on the outside of your beanie. So this technique works best if you go slow, and there's 3 things to keep in mind. One is to make sure you're picking up the stitch in the correct order, and the stitch markers help you identify which stitch is next. The second thing is to make sure those stitches are pushed down to the bottom of the needle and also number 3 is the bulk between the two needles. You want to make sure that gets pushed down below that red bar. So just go slow. Take your time going all the way around, picking up these stitches and placing them on the needle. And I'm almost done here. I've got this one last stitch to do, and that is our join row number 1. Now we're going to do, sorry, I thought I had dropped a stitch there, but we're okay. So join row number 2 is just going around one more time, and I'm just making sure that all of these stitches are properly formed. Now I'm going to change color for the top portion of the beanie, and I'm just going to knit the rows per the sheet, and I'm going to bind off as usual. So once it's done, we'll give it a tug in both directions. We'll remove that waste yarn, and I'm just going to simply secure these tails. I'm going to pull some of them down into the brim. And for the white, I'm going to go ahead and use the duplicate stitch to kind of hide that tail. I really don't want it to move around on me. And then we'll cinch the top portion of the hat closed, and I'll secure that along with using the duplicate stitch to bury that tail. And then all you need to do is add a pom-pom and you're all set. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. The specific row counts can be found in the Ultimate Knitting Machine cheat sheet for double brim beanies. This can be found in my Etsy and Ravelry shops. These are linked below, along with other places you can find me and my projects. So don't forget to subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up. Thanks for watching.